When talking about the ongoing confrontation between Russia and the Western world, we often forget that the consequences of this conflict also affect other regions of the world. In particular, those that are not prepared for a protracted crisis. We mean Africa. On March 12, a debating club gathering was held in France in honor of Lionel Zinsou, former Prime Minister of Benin, a graduate of the French Higher School of Political Science, financier, and a Rothschild Group employee. Gathered in the sumptuous salon folk were mostly the fledglings from the Rothschild nest, bankers, diplomats, and a few acting ministers. Taking the floor, Lionel Zinsou said the following. All we hear now is this crisis, anti-Russian sanctions, oil, gas. Do you understand what this crisis means for Africa? Russia supplies us with grain and corn. All logistics go through the Black Sea. And the African world froze in horror watching just what was going on. Terrified by the actions of the US and the European Union. Africans won't buy your stories about democracy. These are just your fairy tales for internal consumption. The majority of the African elite was educated in the Soviet Union, doctors, engineers, pilots, teachers, scientists. Russians are the only Europeans who have decolonized Africa. And Africa remembers it, just as Africa remembers European atrocities. If you noticed, African countries did not support the UN resolution condemning Russia. And they will never support any resolutions against Russia. It is etched into any African's mind that Russia is good, no matter what you think about it. Period. All of Africa is watching the Central African Republic and Mali. What the Europeans had failed to do for decades, the Russians accomplished in a year. In place of the Central African Republic there were gangs, while today there is a real state there. I know that there are diplomats here, foreign ministry employees. I appeal to you, to French diplomacy, look for a solution to your problem as soon as possible, because if the conflict does not end in a month, Africa will break out. For you, energy problems always come first. In the worst case, you will have less heat and fewer cars, while in Africa we will have hunger. Hear me out, the crisis in Africa will mean the destruction of Europe. Come to your senses, look for diplomatic solutions. And don't forget that countries like India and China support Russia. Africa supports Russia. I do not want to talk about democracy, and you will not make me, an African, to shed tears over stories about the unfortunate Ukraine and calls for humanity. Your democracy is your business. There is no need to impose on us your ideas about how we, Africans, should live our lives. Again, look for compromises, let the diplomats do their job. Time is against us. We have 30 days. 30, not more. As you might understand, the deadline that Zinsou set has already passed. No diplomatic solution has been found. Moreover, the very idea of a peace settlement, after Borrell's belligerent appeals, has lost perspective. This means famine and probably a new wave of violence and revolutions await Africa. A recent vote at the UN showed that more than half of Africa's countries sympathize with Russia or maintain a neutral position. Mostly these are the countries that had close ties with the USSR. It is highly likely that the wave of people's anger at worsening living conditions will be directed not against Russia, whose presence in Africa is quite modest, but against France and the Western world as such. This means that Europe will face another shrinking of markets and problems with the supply, now of African raw materials, as well as new flows of refugees. There is no doubt that Russia and, of course, China will try to take advantage of the situation to expand their presence in Africa.